Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today's podcast is about cowboys and aliens. I'll be talking about two rugged individuals that got involved with non-human intelligences. But first, I'd like to discuss AARO's, or the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's yearly report. It's going to be a very interesting podcast. Okay, so the government, that is Pentagon, the Department of Defense, put out a yearly report on its investigation into UAPs. And this is done through the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Okay, so this is from the U.S. Department of Defense, and it's a statement by Pentagon Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder, who's their usual spokesperson. And it's on the Historical Record Report on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon, Volume 1. And they're required to do this as per the National Authorization Act that was passed. This is the last remaining segment after it was gutted. They have to put out information as it's accumulated in the archives. So it says here that last week the Department of Defense delivered to Congress the initial volume of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's Historical Record Report, which reviews the record of the United States government pertaining to unidentified anomalous phenomena, as required by the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023. As I was saying before, it's part of the National Defense Authorization Act. In completing this report, AARO reviewed all official U.S. government investigatory efforts since 1945. Okay, so they're required to go all the way back to 1945, which is before Roswell, by the way. I'm going on here now. So since 1945, researched classified and unclassified archives, conducted dozens of interviews. Okay, I don't know if they conducted as many interviews as they say. Sean Kirkpatrick actually said that he never interviewed David Grush. Okay, going on. AARO will publish a second volume that will provide analysis of information acquired by AARO after November the 1st, 2023. So that's very convenient. The goal of AARO's efforts in producing this volume and the second forthcoming one. So there's going to be two, folks. The second forthcoming one is to use a rigorous analytic and scientific approach to investigate past U.S. government-sponsored UAP investigation efforts and the claims made by interviewees that the U.S. government and various contractors have recovered and are hiding off-world technology and biological material. Yes, as Dr. Greer has shown evidence of. Okay, going on here, AARO has approached this project with the widest possible aperture. I'm not so sure. Thoroughly investigating these assertions and claims without any particular preconceived conclusion or hypotheses. I think they have preconceived conclusions. AARO is committed to reaching conclusions based on verifiable evidence. As AARO has said before, they will follow the evidence where it leads, wherever it leads. Not so confident about that last statement. Final paragraph says, to date, AARO has found no verifiable evidence. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. The main point of this press release, AARO's press release, was to say this, that they have found no verifiable evidence for claims that the U.S. government and private companies have access to or have been reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. Okay, so they're denying that any black special access programs actually exist. There are no black budgets, and they have never reverse engineered a UFO. Okay, so this goes on to say also, AARO has found no evidence that any U.S. government investigation, academic-sponsored research, or official review panel has confirmed that any sighting of a UAP represented extraterrestrial technology. Okay, so all those videos that we see of UAPs are not extraterrestrial. And they say that they have no evidence of reverse engineering of um, UAP craft. So, what are those sightings that are recorded on video that we see all the time on X and Reddit? Okay, the last paragraph goes on to say all investigative efforts at all levels of classification conducted concluded that the most sightings were ordinary objects and phenomena and the result of misidentification. This sounds like the same sort of propaganda and disinformation that they've been putting out since the 1950s. AARO accesses that all of the named and described alleged hidden UAP reverse engineering programs provided by interviewees either do not exist, are misidentified authentic national security programs that are not related to extraterrestrial technology exploitation or resolved to a de-established program. And it says at the end there that you can find the unclassified version of the historical record report, volume 1, which is what they're referring to, on defense.gov or on the AARO websites. Whether it's truthful or not, that's another matter. And as I was reading this, I couldn't help but think of Dr. Greer and his press club event this past year, 2023, and how he presented all that evidence that did show that there are black budget programs and that there are companies that are reverse engineering UAPs. And soon after I read that press release from the Department of Defense, I came across a email from Dr. Greer himself reacting to that press release from the Pentagon. This is a artist rendering of the man-made UFO that interacted with one of the Disclosure Project witnesses. Okay, so the email from Dr. Greer says that below is what was written in Washington Post about the AARO report. AARO is the Defense Department group taking testimony about the UAP UFO issue. Okay, and the Washington Post is quoted as saying, a lengthy Defense Department review of U.S. government activities related to unidentified anomalous phenomenon, more commonly known as UFOs, has found no evidence that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited Earth or that authorities have recovered crashed alien spacecraft and are hiding them from the public. And the next paragraph says, one of the Disclosure Project witnesses who went in person to the AARO office to give his testimony stated categorically to Dr. Greer today. So this witness said, I never told AARO it was an ET craft I saw. I said numerous times it was 100% man-made. He also read other testimony in that report that he knew to be incorrect from the several of his fellow whistleblowers had stated. It was always around the issue of whether a craft was ET origin or human origin. Dr. Greer has been stating for years that not that there are UFOs visiting the planet, but that humans have reverse engineered and developed the technology so that humans have craft that look very similar to and behave like ET made craft. If it was known that humans have these types of craft, it would change the perception of two major issues. And Dr. Greer has said this repeatedly. Number one, the energy issue. It means we have the means to fix all the energy problems we are facing because we do not need fossil fuels. ET craft and the human craft made to look like ET craft do not use fossil fuels. And number two, attacks allegedly perpetuated by ETs could be proven to be perpetuated by humans with craft mimicking ET-made craft. And this is one of the main points that Stephen Greer always makes, that abductions have been done by humans in ET-looking craft, not the aliens themselves. And I did a podcast on Leah Haley, where she was abducted by the military as well as aliens. Been a lot of reports about this happening where abductees say that they see human people on board the craft, not aliens. The fact that the truth is being covered up by AARO's office makes it even more important that Congress holds open hearings so the public can hear for themselves from these courageous witnesses and whistleblowers, I think. I got this post on Reddit, and it reads, "This is how AARO does their investigations. Is this a joke?" And there's a quote from the report itself. And the report says, named companies allegedly experimenting on alien technology, um, colon, AARO has found no evidence that U.S. companies ever possessed off-world technology. The executive scientists and chief technology officers of the companies named by interviewees met with the director of AARO and denied on the record that they ever recovered, possessed, or engaged in reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology. And the post says the claim is that there is a reverse engineering program with aerospace companies. And we all know that's true. But what does AARO do? They ask these companies nicely, and they say there is no reverse engineering program, and AARO takes their word and leaves. This is not an investigation, folks. This is worse than Blue Book and the Condom report. Either AARO is dumb or they are a disinformation agency. And I think the latter is probably true, unfortunately. Okay, so I just thought I'd update you guys about what's going on with AARO, the Old Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, even though at this point, I think all of us know that we're not going to get disclosure from the government. I'd like to move on now and talk about Cowboys and Aliens. And I'm not talking about the movie Cowboys and Aliens starring Daniel Craig and Harrison Ford. It's not that Cowboys and Aliens, although that movie was a result of a lot of reports that went on during the 1800s. With all the whistleblowers coming out now and being taken seriously, I thought that it would be interesting to go back and look at some of these other abduction stories and that weren't taken seriously at the time and check them out. This article is taken from the Cowboy State Daily, and it's entitled Alien Abductions of Two Wyoming Men in the 1970s Remain Unexplainable. So yeah, like I said, recent whistleblower testimony saying that the U.S. government is covering up a lot regarding UAP. They, I think, make us look at these old claims in a new light and maybe take them a little bit more seriously, including a pair of Wyoming encounters in the 1970s that made national headlines. Check this out. This article, by the way, is by Jack Nichols, and it was written September the 30th, 2023. It's entitled Alien Abductions of Two Wyoming Men in the 1970s Remain Unexplainable. And I'll be reading right from there. Okay, so if aliens from other worlds exist, what is their fascination with our cattle? And I know that we haven't had too many cattle mutilations lately, but back in the 70s, it was rampant. Extraterrestrial visits to the remotest of American soil, like far-flung ranches and secluded Roswell, Area 51, Wyoming. All places where virtually no one lives. And that's true. I've been out there, folks, other than a small, teeny tiny town called Rachel. No one lives out there. It's all military and the military base there. Okay, the article goes on to say, therefore, all places intelligent beings from outer space choose to land their unidentified flying objects and snoop around. Yeah, they would be more comfortable in remote places, obviously. After traveling presumably jillions of light years, cooped up in a souped up saucer, The last thing aliens want to do is have to make a lot of chit chat with locals about the weather. These remote locations also allow space creatures to get down to their main order of business on Earth, harvesting cow parts and probing unsuspecting yokels. Okay, this is written in tongue in cheek, of course. Two such prodigious examples of which happened in the cowboy state in the 1970s when UFO hysteria was at its peak. This incident took place in Bosler, Wyoming, and the population is stated as fewer than 10. Okay, so it's a very remote place. The dusty old railroad town north of Laramie is perched squarely in the middle of the state's vast high plains. So this sort of sets the Western scene for you. It's set in the vast high plains. Pat McGuire, show a picture of him. That's Pat McGuire right there on the left. Pat McGuire ranched a 5,000 acre spread east of there in the 1970s. Born and raised in Wheatland, McGuire was a Wyoming cowboy through and through, the kind born in a pair of Wranglers with a pearl snap shirt, handy with horses in a quiet, sturdy way, and unlike most of his ilk, he was not given to drink. Okay, so he's sort of setting the mood here. This person was sober, was not prone to drinking. Pat McGuire, was a steady worker. On a hunting trip with his in-laws, changed McGuire's life course. He would never be the same. While chasing wapiti, or elk, in the Tetons in early October 1973, McGuire and his brother-in-law became lost. The pair experienced what was later described as an orange glow in the sky. They eventually made their way back to their pickup with an eerie feeling and unable to account for several elapsed hours. It would be a long time before aliens would make contact again, though at the same time, McGuire just chalked up his hunting experience as weird. Unearthly visitations. Strange instances of cattle mutilations were in the news across the country. Beginning in 1974, McGuire had his own close encounter on August the 30th, 1976, when he found one of his calves dead, missing its nose and ears. The rancher camped out that night to catch the culprit. He and his cousin, Mark Murphy, witnessed lights streaking across the night sky. They followed the lights, rifles in hand, but could not find where they went or if they landed. The next morning, they found another dead cow. Again, no tracks. No sign of struggle. Nothing unusual except a dead cow with organs and sex parts missing. McGuire called the Albany County Sheriff, who came out to take photos. On September the 5th, a routine head count found a cow missing. The lights came back September the 12th. The sky was ablaze in orange, McGuire recalled. 5 distinct craft hovered low to the ground as 2 others landed. Shadowy figures could be seen through the spaceship's windows, walking about and pointing outside at the Wyoming Cowboys. The spaceships returned the next night, and McGuire was ready. He snapped several photos of the scene, Polaroids. Oddly, predictably, none of them came out. McGuire was at his wit's end. He decided to enlist a third witness, a man named Jimmy Ashley, and add a dog named Bear for protection. One night, while camped out on the ranch, Bear started barking. The trio woke and saw a craft had landed again. McGuire recalled Ashley walking right up to it as if in a trance. He touched the ship and was immediately engulfed in flames, although he did not appear to be burning. That's odd. Ashley was unharmed, but never the same, according to McGuire's son David. McGuire filed a report with the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, AARO. I guess that was the version of AARO back then, AARO, in 1976, claiming visits from extraterrestrials were a regular thing on his ranch. Okay, so he wasn't afraid to say that aliens had been landing on his ranch for a while. And this is a photo of him. Okay, wait, it gets even more bizarre. If McGuire's story isn't outlandish enough, it takes a decidedly bizarre turn in late 1977. Stymied at every turn, trying to find water for his ranch, McGuire had run out of drilling companies that would help him. Dozens of failed holes and scores of expert geologists told McGuire he would never find water in the arid prairie basin where his ranch was situated. Undaunted, McGuire convinced well driller Rick Henderson to try. He promised they would hit water within 10 days. He had a vision. When a dream, deja vu, which McGuire had frequent vivid bouts with, or an actual recollection of what happened on that fateful hunting trip, McGuire suddenly knew right where to dig. He piled 3 rocks to mark the spot, and Henderson began drilling. They made it 275 feet, deeper than any other hole McGuire had dug on his ranch, but still had found nothing. Henderson was ready to quit, but McGuire urged him on. At 350 feet, exhausted, they knocked off for the day. That night, while sleeping on site in a trailer, the two heard a loud knock, then another, then a third. They were terrified. Water began gushing up from the hole. McGuire had hit a deep, dependable aquifer pumping 5,000 gallons of fresh water to a parched prairie where everyone said the rancher would never be able to irrigate. If friends and neighbors were laughing at McGuire before, they suddenly took notice. So too did mainstream media. Yeah, definitely. I would too. McGuire's appearance on ABC's Eyewitness News on March the 5th, 1980, where he said UFOs landed on his property, quote, maybe 25 or 30 times, end quote, opened the floodgates. Mass media couldn't get enough of the Wyoming rancher who met regularly with aliens. Okay, I'm not sure if that's true or whether he's just enjoying his celebrity. The National Enquirer ran the headline, quote, farmer, colon, aliens use my ranch as their landing place, end quote, on March the 24th, 1981. Casper Star Tribune also published several articles on the local celebrity. But at home, the ridicule was relentless. In a recent piece for HuffPost, David Riedel recalled the alienation his father experienced from even his own family. Yeah, and I remember reading on Reddit recently, his daughter posted that she was sorry that she never took McGuire seriously while he was alive, that they would always make fun of him, and that she posted that now with all the whistleblower coming out and the disclosure, that she realizes that she should have taken him a bit more seriously. It's too bad that in hindsight, we see our parents differently or we see whistleblowers differently these days. Okay, the next section says hypnosis drudges up dark memories. Around that time, noted University of Wyoming psychologist and UFO researcher Leo Sprinkle became aware of McGuire's story. Sprinkle led the rancher through several sessions of hypnosis where McGuire was able to recall more of his encounters. Okay, so now he's doing hypnotic regression. McGuire called the aliens, quote, star people, end quote. They were human-like in appearance, about 6 feet tall, weighing around 200 pounds. They had large eyes, thin lips, hairless, with no bridge on the nose. Their clothing was black except for a silver belt buckle with a star resembling the Star of David. The star people warned of a coming climate apocalypse. They instructed McGuire where to dig for a well. The star people promised they would bring an underground river from Canada to his ranch if he flew the Israeli flag over his property. Okay, now that's pretty bizarre. What Israel has anything to do with this is beyond me. Dozens of sessions with Sprinkle had a toll, it seems. McGuire's paranoia grew worse. Friends say the jovial Irishman was never the same after then. That's too bad. McGuire would talk about a star man named Michael, who instructed him to father 13 children. Wow. One for every tribe of Israel. What's this obsession with Israel? When his wife Wanda balked at number 9, he divorced her and married a woman named Lynn. Wow, he's determined. McGuire also claimed he was transported into Ariel Sharon's body during the Six-Day War. He thought the government put implants in his brain. On and on. The wild accusations went until the day Michael wanted McGuire to run for governor in 1982. So I think at this point, maybe McGuire became a little bit unhinged. Quote, "A vote for me is a vote for extraterrestrials," was his slogan. McGuire proclaimed during his first election campaign at a local shopping mall. He lost to three-term incumbent Ed Hirschler by a wide margin, 44,396 to 7,720 in the Democratic primary. He actually got 7,720 votes, though. His grasp with reality slipping, McGuire fell into financial ruin. His property was foreclosed. It is now owned by UW, including the well. Abandoned by friends and family, McGuire died destitute on May the 14th, 2009, at the age of 67. And that's too bad. As I said, I remember running across his daughter's post on Reddit a few weeks ago, and she seemed sort of sorry that she didn't take him more seriously, and I guess they didn't take care of him, and he became homeless. All right, so this didn't just happen once to McGuire. It happened again almost exactly a year after McGuire said he was invited aboard an alien vessel while hunting in Wyoming. Another local man made a similar claim. Okay, this was only a year after McGuire. Everett Carl Higdon, Jr., a foreman on an oil rig in Rawlins, took off from work one day to go elk hunting in Medicine Bow National Forest on October the 25th, 1974. He too would have an unexplainable encounter of the fourth kind. Higdon, 41, married with 4 kids, was a capable roughneck with 15 years of experience in the patch. The former Air Force veteran of the Korean War was often dubbed, quote, the Wyoming Coyote by his crew for his dogged ability to keep at anything until he got it done. So he was pretty competent. The fateful day, he borrowed the company truck and headed 40 miles south for McCarty Canyon. When the road got rough, Higdon parked and took off on foot. At about 4 p.m., he topped the ridge, spotted 5 elk grazing, and hoisted his brand new 7mm Magnum rifle, taking aim at the bull elk in the bunch. The next thing Higdon knew, it was 11:30 p.m. He was being shaken awake by friends who found him sitting in his truck, dazed and incoherent. He remembers blacking out. That was it. Later that night, at the Carbon County Memorial Hospital, nurse Ella Peterson asked him again and again what his name was. Higdon did not know, nor did he immediately recognize his wife, Marjorie. His eyes were red, watery, and burning. He was disoriented, and his equilibrium was off. He was extremely sensitive to light. As Higdon slowly began to get his memory back, he recalled pulling the trigger of his rifle and strangely feeling no kickback, hearing no report. The bullet exited the gun in slow motion and then dropped to the ground about 50 feet in front of him. That's crazy. Then, while going through his clothes for the wash, his wife found the bullet in his jacket pocket. It was turned inside out and flattened. Wow. But intact. as if it had struck a very hard object. Ballistics experts were unable to explain what could do that to a bullet. So he recalls his encounter, and again, the local ufologists got involved through several sessions of hypnosis. The oil field worker recounted a tale that never changed in 5 decades. So neither he or McGuire ever changed their stories. Higdon said he was knocked to the ground somehow. Standing over him was a humanoid figure about 6 feet tall, weighing about 180 pounds, which is about the same as McGuire reported his alien to be about 6 feet and 180 pounds. The male-looking alien had yellowish skin, no ears, with eyes small and deep set. His mouth was thin and lipless, with an open slit from which 3 large, blocky teeth were visible. 2 short antennae grew from his forehead. The hair on the being's head was like straw and stood straight up. Okay, that's a little unusual. But I mean, they say that there are all sorts of aliens visiting the Earth. He wore a tight black jumpsuit, similar to a diving suit. He also had a pair of seat belts and a metal belt with a yellow star decoration at his waist. Okay, so very similar to what McGuire had said, including that Star of David on his belt. Instead of a right hand, the creature possessed a prosthesis that resembled a power drill of some kind. Now that's unusual. I've never heard of aliens having a prosthesis, especially one that resembled a drill. So the alien is quoted as saying, "How are you?" And it asked him that in English. Higdon replied, "Pretty good," trying to stay calm. The strange being called himself Also One, and that's spelled Ausso, or also one. Your sun burns us, Also One said, and then offered Higdon 4 pills in a small packet for nourishment. Higdon swallowed one out of compulsion, even though he would later say he rarely took even aspirin. So both McGuire and Higdon are being described here as being very sober people that are not prone to taking pills or drinking. The article goes on to say when Also One suggested they go for a ride in his cube-shaped spaceship, Higdon said sure. Okay, so the spacecraft or the UAP in this description is a cube shape, which is interesting because Ryan Graves reported seeing a cube within a sphere UAP. He was one of the whistleblowers that Dr. Stephen Greer encouraged to come out and speak on pilot safety. The cube ship was windowless, doorless, and small for even Higdon to fit into. But somehow he was transported inside along with Also One, 2 other alien creatures, and the 5 elk that had been outside. So even though it looked small from the outside, not only him and a couple of other NHIs were able to get in, but they also brought in 5 elk. And I've heard that as well, that craft or UAP craft can look small on the outside and then be very large on the inside. Okay, the article goes on to say, Higdon said the trip to Also One's planet took less than a minute. That's pretty fast, 1 minute. It was described as 163,000 light years away. They arrived at dark and landed near a tower with a flashing light on top so brilliant that it hurt Higdon's eyes. The tower reminded Higdon of Seattle's Space Needle. It was conical in shape, about 100 feet tall, and made a buzzing sound. Surrounding the tower, Higdon saw 5 human-like beings, a middle-aged man, a young girl, 2 teenage girls, and a teenage boy standing around conversing. Also floated out of the craft with Higdon into the tower and up in an elevator. They entered a room where Higdon stood on a platform while a device moved out of the wall, scanned him, and then retracted back into the wall. Higdon was then told he was not what they needed and would be taken back on Earth. I guess whatever they scanned didn't show what they needed, or maybe he had some sort of defect that they then decided that they couldn't use him. During the encounter, Higdon was told by Also One that his people would explore Earth at various times to find animals to breed for food. Okay. Also spoke of a different sun and seas on their planet that were inadequate for supporting life. Okay, so they had issues on their planet. After the examination, Also and Higdon re-entered the cubicle and returned to Earth. Also pointed his drill hand at Higdon's pocket and floated the package of remaining pills to himself. He also returned Higdon's rifle. Back on Earth, Higdon stumbled back to his truck where rescuers found him at about just before midnight. The truck was not in the same place Higdon parked it. It would be noted later. It was in a much more rugged area 3 miles away that the two-wheel driver could not have navigated. That's interesting to note. It was in a spot where it could have never gotten. In fact, rescuers noticed no tire tracks leading to the truck. Okay, so it was transported there by the craft. Upon examination at the hospital, it was found Higdon's tuberculosis scars were no longer visible on x-rays, and he no longer suffered from kidney stones. Wow. So that scan actually cured him of the kidney stones and removed his tuberculosis scars. Otherwise, the 41-year-old was in good health. The San Antonio Star and many other publications made Higdon's encounter front-page tabloid news early in 1975. He's quoted as saying, "Life is not the same since I met the man." Higdon would tell the newspapers. Higdon never had another encounter. For years, his story was dismissed as made-up fantasy by a man seeking a bit of notoriety. Yet Higdon later passed polygraph tests and never exploited his story for financial gain. So he was a little bit more of an introvert than McGuire was. He never went on any shows, didn't exploit his celebrity. In my own personal opinion, I find that cases I've investigated, there seems to be no evidence of hoax, no evidence of psychotic reaction, which would cause an individual to falsely believe that he or she has had an abduction. Sprinkle told In Search of during an interview in 1978. So that I'm left with mysterious and sometimes uncomfortable feeling that the cases are happening as the individuals described, he said. That is, that they are being taken on board, examined, and released by intelligent beings. Carl's wife, Marjorie, wrote a book about the experience. It's called The Alien Abduction of the Wyoming Hunter, and it was published in 2017 and is available now on Amazon. Carl Higdon himself worked through the trauma and eventually returned to the oil fields. He retired in 1997 and relocated to Texas, where he was born. Higdon died January the 26th, 2022, not too long ago, in Temple, Texas, of COVID pneumonia. How about that? COVID got him. Carl Higdon said, "It don't mean a hill of beans to me whether anybody believes it or not. I know what happened to me." Carl Higdon said, "If people want to take it at face value, that's fine. If they don't, that don't make any difference. I just want people to be aware in case something like this happens to them." So he sounds pretty honest. He really doesn't care if anybody believes him or not. Carl Higdon and his wife Marjorie, when they first met, and right before he died. And he died in 2022. He lived a long time, never changed his story. And Marjorie wrote a book about the incident. Marjorie's book is called The Alien Abduction of the Wyoming Hunter. It's the report that first came out in the San Antonio newspaper. This is what the alien looked like, and this is the cover of Marjorie Higdon's book called "The Alien Abduction of the Wyoming Hunter." If you guys want to get it, you can get it on Amazon. This is what also one looked like, and this is a sketch by Carl Higdon. McGuire, Pat McGuire. This is a sketch of what happened to Carl Higdon and what also one looked like. These are different pictures and sketches, some of which came out in the newspaper. This is also one here on the left. This is Carl Higdon himself with the rifle that he was using that day. Here's a sketch of him with also one. And here is Carl Higdon being hypnotically regressed. Also one again, and Pat McGuire. And this was all taken from the Cowboy State Daily, and the article was by Jake Nichols. Thank you, Jake Nichols. Great reporting here. This next individual is sort of a rugged, self-made man type. I included it because he not only met with aliens, but he never came back after his meeting with them. I got this article from the How and Whys. It's an article by the outstanding investigative journalist Vicky Verma. And the title of this article is UFO Enthusiast Granger Taylor Disappeared After Claiming that Aliens Invited Him on a Ship. Back in the 1980s, something very unusual happened with a talented man with surprising mechanical skills and an immense passion for outer space and exploring the universe. One day, he wrote a note to his parents and disappeared. Canadian man Granger Taylor was only 32 when he vanished not long after building a life-sized spaceship that looked like a UFO in the backyard of his family's farm. Granger was born on October the 7th, 1948, in Duncan, situated in Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada. His father died in an accident when he was just a boy, and later his mother remarried. His stepfather was very supportive and stood with him at every step of his life. From the very childhood, Taylor had a bright mind. He had an incredible talent for fixing almost any broken thing. He dropped out of school in grade 8 and started working as a mechanic in local shops. Okay, that's unusual. Here's a picture of him. Granger Taylor. Looks like a fairly sensible person. His physical state and uncanny talent never matched. He was a tall man of 190 centimeters. Okay, so that's what, 6'2"? That's fairly tall. Okay, so he was a tall man of 6'2", but was kind and of an introvert. Okay, not all tall people are extroverted. People who knew him used to describe him as, quote, eccentric, end quote. He continued to amaze people with his abilities, but ridiculed by his peers. Oh, that's too bad, poor guy. When he was in his 20s, he found his immense interest in locomotives and aircraft engines. Not far from his house, he discovered an abandoned World War II P-40 Kitty Hawk plane, wow, located by the Trans-Canadian Highway. With the help of several kids whom he mentored in fixing machines, he fixed the plane, which was later purchased by a private collector in North Dakota. Wow, he is talented, or he was talented. He also fixed a steam engine, which was on display at one of the largest museums in British Columbia. And there's a picture of that steam engine right here. It looks in pristine shape. Wow. As Taylor's skills were developing and his curiosity about the universe expanded, he started getting obsessed with restoration and invention. From ordinary machinery to aircraft engines, his interest soon turned into an interest in space and space travel. It became an obsession, and all his time was devoted to space exploration, UFOs, and space travel. He read constantly, collected at home a huge library dedicated to space. And here's a picture of that UAP that he built. That's pretty damn good for one person by himself. Taylor built a spaceship from the scrap metals in his yard that resembled a modern UFO. Using two satellite dishes, he created a living space almost like a treehouse. Wow, cool. He equipped it with a TV, couch, and a wood-burning stove. Oh, so you could live in it. He spent a lot of time there thinking about the technology behind UFOs. Incredible. Stacy Jenkins of Alibi Entertainment said, quote, in terms of locomotion, he understood how things worked. He was amazing at making and fixing everything to do with motors. He was a genius. But he started to imagine, knowing how cars and planes and trains worked here, that aliens had better technology. Of course. In the late 1980s, Taylor shared with his friends that the aliens communicated with him telepathically while he was in his spaceship. Wow. He was convinced that the aliens would take him on a journey to space. One of his friends, named Nielsen, told reporters what Taylor had described to him while being in his self-made spaceship. Quote, he said it happened when he was in bed. He lay there and got mental communications with somebody from another galaxy. He couldn't see them, like they were talking just to him and to his mind. He was asking questions about the means for powering their crafts. The only thing they would tell him was it was magnetic. A few days later, Taylor told Nielsen that he received an invitation from some invisible source calling him to go on, quote, a trip through the solar system. And there's a copy here included in the article of his handwritten note. And it says, Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship. Recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you, as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger. Okay, but it sounds like it's a mixed message there. He says that it's only a 42-month trip. Then he returns, but why is he leaving a will and leaving all his earthly possessions? On November the 29th, 1980, he left his home in a blue 1972 Datsun pickup truck, leaving everything behind he created with a heartfelt note to his parents. A day before his disappearance, Taylor had a long talk with his stepfather. He said that he was grateful to his stepfather for treating him like his own child. On the afternoon of the same day he vanished, his stepfather discovered a note tacked to his bedroom door. At the back side of that note was a hand-drawn map of Waterloo Mountain. Now, why would it have a map of Waterloo Mountain? Taylor's family and friends hoped that he would return in 42 months, but it never happened. He was last seen around 6:30 p.m., leaving a local restaurant. Police began searching for him, but never found a trace until March 1986. Some forest workers found truck fragments with bones at the site of an explosion on Mount Prevost near Taylor's house. It was impossible to identify the bones due to the tiny fragments, and DNA testing was not so popular during that time. But the fabrics of the T-shirt also found at the site was later confirmed by Taylor's mother that it belonged to him. The authorities declared the truck belonged to Taylor. Oh, that's too bad. From the available information, Taylor used to carry explosives in his truck for blasting tree trunks. On the official note, he also had carried explosives on the day of his disappearance. Somehow it blew and killed him, but his friend Robert Keller had a different opinion on it. He said that Taylor had often carried dynamite in his truck to blow up tree stumps. He added that Taylor had good experience handling dynamite and used them countless times. What's more, Keller said, quote, he did have dreams that they, aliens, were coming to get him, end quote. So where is Taylor now? Nobody has any idea, but his parents waited for him for 4 years, leaving their back door open for him. That's too bad. In hope that he would return after completing his expedition. There are many conspiracies about his sudden disappearance. Some say he had been taken by the UFO. Some believe that he got tired of his boring life in small Vancouver town and wanted to restart his life, and he left everything, while others believe he was mentally unstable and died in an accident.
Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship. As reoccurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. Love, Granger. He went to Bob's Grill, one of his favorite spots in Duncan.
Granger came in and talked to everybody at the diner and basically said his goodbyes and, told everybody he was going to space. Everybody kind of laughed him out of the restaurant, like, oh yeah, Granger and his wild ideas and stories and stuff again, and kind of chalked it up to that. Nobody believed a word he was saying. The last place that he went to was our place. He said, they're coming for me today.
So did Granger actually go off into space with NHIs, or was he blown up in his own truck by dynamite that he was carrying? The article is unclear. I'm sort of rooting for the latter, that he did make it up into space. They seemed like a nice guy. All three individuals that I discussed in this podcast, they were cowboy-like, rugged individuals, self-made people. They were sort of outsiders also. Granger sort of being an outsider because he was adopted, didn't go to school, dropped out in 8th grade, but was highly intelligent, understood machinery and technology. And McGuire and Higdon, they were both almost literally cowboys living out there in Wyoming in the high plains, which is where, obviously, if non-human intelligence decide to land on Earth, would make a perfect place for them to land because it's not very densely populated. The town that McGuire lived in back then in the 1970s had a population of 10. But I think now, with whistleblowers being taken more seriously and the fact that the government is again dismissing them, we should take a second look at these cowboy-like encounters and testimony that was disregarded back then. And remember, McGuire and Hegden both stuck to their stories. Hegden's wife wrote a book about it. None of them ever recanted their stories, and they stuck by it. So I think if government really wants disclosure, they would include more abduction victims. Hear firsthand testimony of people that have seen UAPs, possibly had encounters with NHIs. I'm not sure if that'll ever happen, judging from the recent report where they're saying that they have no evidence, quote unquote, at all of any UAPs or any man-made reverse UAPs being reverse engineered by aerospace companies. They've denied it flat out. So I think that AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is put out there for disinformation. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed my podcast on Cowboys and Aliens. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let's send out a manifested shield of protection for all the kids that are in Gaza and the Ukraine. They're lonely and afraid. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.